I guess we're beginning now. Yes. Um, we're going to talk. Scott and I are going to talk a little bit about this year. This is a celebration of silver linings in the plague year, and I'm going to ask him a little bit about what it's been like at the place where I worked for over 40 years, NPR. And I'd like to begin by saying that Scott and I go back to the early Pleistocene of NPR. I was a newscaster in Washington in December of 1976. I came there. I was in the morning, so I had to get there quite early. And in Chicago, it was even earlier. But every morning, Scott would be up pitching me a short news piece for a newscast, a news spot, we call that, for I think it was $25 that, or however little we could pay.
$10, $10.
And Scott demonstrated in those mornings where I first came to talk with him every day with stories about, Chicago under Mayor Daley, the elder Mayor Daley, and the death of Mayor Daley, the first St. Patrick's Day you have without Mayor Daley. And in all of these, Scott demonstrated the gift, the talent that would earmark him for success in public radio, which was the willingness to work absurd hours for cheap. And he did so, and he is still doing it to this day. As obviously the host of morning of a weekend edition
he'll
on
get
Saturday.
$10 for news spot
Yes.
now. Only I signed something years ago, and it's.
So here's the overarching question that I have for you, Scott, which is I've been retired now for 3 years, so I'm just a listener like everyone else. A year ago, things changed radically for us in all sorts of ways, including the ways in which news organizations work and the way that NPR works. I used to come in and see you maybe every month. Something would bring me to the office, and I'd stop. And I haven't been inside the office for a month, which is far less interesting than the fact that there are people who host our programs who have barely been inside the office for the past
including me,
12 months. And I was hoping that you would. I mean, my view of broadcast news is that it's a team sport and it's highly collaborative, and that in the course of a half an hour you hear hosts and reporters, but you don't hear producers and editors. You don't hear the researchers, the librarians, the engineers who make it all come together. I wonder if you could describe what happened, what has changed between hosting an NPR program every week before the pandemic and since the pandemic.
It's astonishing how quickly things came together, and the so-called system has obviously been refined over the past few months. I now go in to do our show on Saturday, but that's just because our technical director, since it's a single host show, is worried about the line falling out and having silence, which, as I've told him, I think would be a great moment for the audience to reflect. But in any event, for months and months, I hosted from here, and I do most of my interviews just a few feet away in the office upstairs in our apartment, which I believe we've got, the laptop and the microphone set up on my stepfather's old Chicago Public Library table. And it's still a collegial enterprise. When I interview someone now, they can be anywhere in the world. There is typically a Zoom link, sometimes in I must say, in Myanmar and other occupied states, it tends totalitarian states. For some reason, it tends to be WhatsApp. And there is a producer on that Zoom call. There is an editor. If it's a Hollywood star of some kind, they're often PR people. And it's interesting. We see each other on the Zoom call. Typically, we keep our video on the Zoom call, and that's how we interview people all over the world. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages, and I think one of the things that we're aware of, obviously in radio and at NPR, you don't want people to be able to finish a sentence by going like this, because you want to concentrate on the audio. And I think sometimes people are aware of the fact that we can see each other and they're maybe not as expansive as they should be. I will add a parenthetical. You might have heard Bernie Sanders on our show this morning, who was lyrical, talking about his love of minor league baseball, and how upset he is that Major League Baseball is contracting the minor league system and his Vermont Lake Monsters, and it was wonderful, and he was expressive in part because I think that was actually a phone link. The part that I have enjoyed about the Zoom links, and of course it's got to do with this year, you're seeing Hollywood stars in their lairs at home. You're seeing them with pandemic beards. I have been able to introduce our daughter, who is sitting on the other side of the office at home in a chair eating popcorn. I've been able to introduce her to Justin Timberlake and Stan Smith. I'm sorry, Sam Smith. Stan is the tennis player. Sam Smith, the great British singer. And I wouldn't be able to do that ordinarily. That's been very nice. And it's astonishing how quickly it came together. I was talking to the president of NPR the other day about something else entirely. And in any event, he said to the technical people, how quickly would it take us? He said this about a year ago, a little over a year ago. How quickly would it take us to have virtually every on-air talent that we have working remotely? And Dennis Nielsen, whom you know, looked and said it'd take us 3 months. Dennis got it done within a month.
Really?
Absolutely,
really?
Absolutely amazing. And I think the biggest compliment we get is from people who say, I can't tell the difference. Yeah. Now, of course, this, God bless them, this drives the engineers crazy, because they have expended a lot of talent and effort, not to mention money, building these wonderful studios that have superior sound quality. And to be told you can, that you're talking from under the ironing board in a closet, or in my case, a pretty open office that's surrounded by books, and people can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
But what are all those 9 floors for? Yes,
Scott, it's even more basic than the studios. The studios are inside a wonderful building that NPR bought on North Capitol Street in Washington, D.C. And like a great many other employers, one of the questions hanging over everyone is, well, how much of work returns to the office when the coast is clear? And have we learned that, in fact, we could have done with a 3-story building, and that, in fact, we just don't need that much office space anymore?
I will leave that to higher minds to figure out. I know speaking for myself, I think I would, as we proceed and return to the office, I would like to see if I can just work more from home. Yeah. I enjoy it. I enjoy sharing the experience. I live in the city, so but even I don't miss the commute, which is not bad for me living in the city. I think we were lucky to have a program where most of the people on board were familiar to each other before we kind of went to ground a year ago. I think it's very difficult, for reasons I absolutely understand, for people who've just joined us, because there's not the incidental sense of collegiality, walking over to someone and talking in the middle of the day. Most of your conversations are over Zoom, which are partly a performance, or incidental phone links or something like that. And and I think there is the cost in collegiality, getting to know each other, sharing things. But it must be said, I think part of this is generational too.
But you've hit on a very important distinction, and I say this now. I should tell folks that before I became host of All Things Considered, I was running NPR News. And the biggest thing I did was launch your program. It was start Weekend Edition Saturday, and I can understand full well how, from many different remote locations, many people who work for NPR could make another great Weekend Edition Saturday come out one Saturday after the next. I can't imagine how we could have started the program that way. I can't.
Yeah,
I,
I
I
think.
can't
Yeah,
imagine how we could have done something really creative to begin something. Continue it, I get, but create.
yeah. I think that's exactly the I think that's exactly the difference. You know, and there have obviously I say this with respect to the fact that there have been art pieces and collaborations and all kinds of things, enterprises, artistic and creative enterprises that have tried to do something during the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
and some have been, you know, more successful than others. And I applaud every effort. It's what we've got to do. But I absolutely think you're right about that. We couldn't have put the show together. We couldn't have put the show together that way because there wouldn't have been the creative interpersonal sparks.
Yeah.
I think whatever we have been able to achieve over the past year, which I don't discount for a moment, we've got to be clear-eyed about what the sacrifice has been on that too, and what we've been losing and losing out on. And this is one of the things that I guess we'll have to puzzle out. I think we'll make more of a place for working from home. I mean, look, we have one of our editors, who you know, Martha Ann Overland,
Mm-hmm.
uh, has been working from Seattle. It is good to have an editor on the West Coast,
Mm-hmm.
not just a West Coast editor on the national desk, but to have a program with an editor on the West Coast, where even in these days she is exposed to a different view of the news, you know, even a different time zone. I mean, I think all of that is great, where you can have people working from different geographical locations and you know, some ways express the country more. I mean, I will add
Well,
parenthetically,
yeah.
Martha Ann brought us that wonderful insight into what became the topic of my essay this week on the rise of cow cuddling during the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic. Uh, a hardened, embittered New York editor would probably not have discovered that before.
Well, here's a another issue of
Yeah,
what it's been like working for a news organization. I imagine during the
yeah,
past year, if I had still been working and there'd been no pandemic, if I were still hosting All Things Considered,
yeah,
then in October or September of last year, or possibly, well, uh, in August, I would have gone to the Republican National Convention, which would have been a real
yeah.
convention, and I would have talked to a lot. I always got the Republican convention. My colleagues always got the Democratic convention to go
Yeah.
to, and I would have met with a lot of Republicans there and gotten a sense of what they were thinking and what they made of
Yeah.
the political year. And then sometime in September, October, I would have done a political reporting trip, usually to Southern Ohio, Western Pennsylvania. This was the turf I would always go back to time and again, and get a
Hmm.
sense of what things were like in Chillicothe and Steubenville and Wheeling in West
Yeah.
Virginia. Uh, and those trips, you know, involved knocking on doors, sometimes following the local Republican or the local Democrat knocking on doors,
Yeah.
and talking to strangers at length and learning about what they thought about our politics and what they thought about the election. Uh, and for this past year, that kind of experience, I think, has been minimized
Yeah.
for reporters, and I wonder if how you felt that. I mean, did you get the sense that we
Yeah.
weren't hearing as often the face to face conversation in the living room of a Steubenville, Ohio miner, for example?
Yeah. No, I did miss that, and this is something we talked about. This is since I've been, well, I'd have to, since I started hosting weekend. This is almost the longest I've been without going to Cuyahoga County, Ohio.
Hmm. Yeah. Otherwise known as
I,
Cleveland. Yes.
exactly. Cleveland rocks, Cleveland rocks. We were in conversation the other day with someone in Cincinnati who was talking about how someone was stuck in the pandemic in Cleveland and said, can you imagine them being stuck in Cleveland? And all I could think of was, excuse me, someone in Cincinnati is making Cleveland jokes. But in any event, forgive me, I'm going to get in trouble with everyone. I love all the reporting I've done in
Hmm.
Cleveland and Cuyahoga County. And yes, it's, you walk down the street, you walk into church basements,
Hmm. Hmm.
you meet people as they kind of cross the counter pane of your life. And I think that makes in a hundred different ways for a different a conversation, and I think allows you to enter their space in their lives in a different way and talk about their lives, not just their politics. I think in a way that you can begin to kind of piece that together. When we're left with the phone conferences and the Zoom conferences, you have to get right to the politics more or less. And although I try and make room for the other, I think that's limited in the kind of conversations we're talking about. And yeah, there absolutely is a price for that. And there's a what are we calling these octagons, right?
No, nonagons. Nonagons.
Nonagons. I should have counted the size.
John Morris made nine-sided figures for us. Yes.
Oh, God bless. All right, and and I think that that emphasizes the dangers that I think we all know about in modern media, which is what amounts to niche casting as opposed to broadcasting, and just conversing with like-minded people, or, and this is a tendency in the news business anyway that we have to resist, interviewing people who will give us what we want. And by the way, I don't mean necessarily I want someone to say something obnoxious about Donald Trump. No, sometimes you say I want a Trump supporter, but you dictate in your own mind what you want to hear from that Trump supporter. And I think we have to be careful about that, because that way you'll get people, you'll almost ensure the fact that you'll get people who say I'm voting for this candidate because I don't want there to be sex slavery in the basement of pizza parlors.
Yeah.
As opposed to someone saying there's a lot I don't like about this candidate, but I'm going to vote for them anyway because of a certain economic question.
Well, look, when I think back to the from the last political cycle that I worked, the recollections that I have, the things that stick in my mind, are things that were said by people whom I hate the phrase, but news people will refer to as real people, because journalists are also people and we have them on, but they didn't make as deep an impression. The three generations of farmers I met in Pennsylvania who were all going to vote for Donald Trump in 2016 in that cycle, and who fit lots and lots of conservative stereotypes, frankly. Also, the grandfather showed me what he had done to conduct water over his fields, so that he would have he would not pollute his livestock would not pollute a stream, and he was very proud of this, and he was very green about it. And I remember being struck that a lot of people would assume that his concern for the environment and the clean water that crossed his land would have marked him as some kind of liberal of some sort. Not at all. From 2016, I remember the miner from Ohio, whom I spent some time with, who was about to change mines and had been mining for about 4 years. But coal mining jobs, largely because of the rise of natural gas, were becoming fewer and fewer. And I asked him, well, over your 4 years of mining, what was your best year for income? And he said, well, actually, I made about the same every year, and the same in the 2012 through 2016 was about $85,000 a year, with a terrific health insurance plan, thanks to the United Mine Workers Union. And when he was going to take his next job at a non-union mine, it would be he'd have some copays. So that was the only difference. Leave it, take a job driving for the county, you could make $40,000 a year. And that's what happened to a lot of his friends. And his view of what was happening to the country was, to me, very, very vivid. And that's what I think would drive me crazy, missing those conversations.
I'm thinking of a steel worker that we talked to in Birmingham, African American man who said he was going to vote for Donald Trump, and we took the inevitable walk down the street and saw what I think we can fairly describe as the desiccation the neighborhood in the area, because you had all of these. I think he was making $110,000
Mm-hmm.
at one point, and more to the point is, as he said, doing something with his whole being. He was making
Mm-hmm.
steel,
Mm-hmm.
and that was important, and it felt important, and he was a steel worker, and that was his sense of identity. And by the time we talked to him, he was filling in at a liquor store where he,
Yep. Yep.
was a little baffled about how to ring up the sale, and then would, push it through one of those glass revolving doors, and it just didn't pay nearly the same. It didn't feel the same.
Yeah.
It wasn't. I liked him very much, and we welcomed the opportunity to spend some time with him. He was a good man and a good family, and wanted good things in the world. And this was the decision that he made based upon circumstances in his own life. And by the way, I think inevitably we have to point out, according to the polling information we have, in fact, there was a more than slight increase in the number of African American males voting for Donald Trump this time.
Yeah.
I think of our friend in Birmingham. Whether he actually voted that way this time, I don't know. Everyone's ballot is your own, but that's certainly what he seemed ready to do.
Yeah. I'm going to, by the way, in a little bit, we're going to take questions from
Okay.
people who are here. And I'm told that the way that instead of raising a hand, which would be, kind of unhelpful in these circumstances, if you hit the space bar to jump, that's why we'll know that we're calling on you. The space bar here is, you see, I can jump a little bit. But I wanted to ask you first, before we turn to people, about something you've done during the pandemic here, which is quite remarkable. Which is you've created a small family literary show.
Yeah.
I've been on it. I can't even tell how it's distributed. Or is it on Facebook? Is that what it is, or how do? What is
It's
it?
on Periscope. It's on Periscope, a platform that's about to disappear or be folded into Twitter video, and then it's redistributed on Twitter. It's bounced live instantly to Twitter. And it's called Open Book. And, it actually began, I think we're about to have our year anniversary. And it began because I was in New York when this hit. You know my admiration for Stephen Sondheim. I had seen what was the inevitably we'd call it the reboot of Company, which I think is my favorite Sondheim, with Katrina Lenk and Patti LuPone. They were mixing up the gender roles, and I thought it was an absolutely great production. And we were 20 minutes from interviewing Katrina Lenk and Patti LuPone in our New York bureau. By the way, I made a lot of jokes of which I am not proud now. People in our New York bureau would say, "What'd you think of the show?" And I'd go, "God, it's great. I still have a fever and chills." But I like my first COVID joke. But in any event, we're 20 minutes away from interviewing them when Broadway shut down, and of course the interview was canceled. And I said something to the PR person like, "Well, I absolutely understand. I just keep us in mind, and I hope when Broadway reopens in a month, we'll be able to, Well, Broadway hasn't reopened for a year. It'll be more, and who knows if this great production we'll be seeing. In any event, I came back to D.C. on an eerily empty Acela train. And I was also in the middle of a book tour at that point. And my wife, Caroline, said that she's worried about my sense of purpose. She didn't quite put it to me that way. And I usually did a Friday night promo for our show, and where I would read from the one or two books that we'd be featuring and talk about the show, and then my essay on Saturday. So we just began to branch out in the readings. The whole idea was that we would, because there are lots of people that began readings then. Not to compare myself in any way, but Sir Patrick Stewart began to read Shakespeare sonnets. Keith Olbermann began to read from Was it Wodehouse? I'm trying to remember. In any event,
Mm.
and then we discovered we could just, with FaceTime and everything, we could just Zoom links. We could just bring people their faces in, very elemental technology, and this became a family project. Our 17-year-old became the director and producer. Our 14-year-old the graphics, and my wife doing 100 different things, and now she does her own bit on Sundays called Open Bowl, where she talks about food and prepares something. But also, last Sunday, for example, she very movingly recounted her feelings about sexual harassment, based in part on her own experience as a adolescent and teenager, and just she felt the need to do it and the need to share it. And it's been quite wonderful. And we've had an amazing assortment of big name guests, including Robert Siegel.
I was a very inexpert commentator on Proust for you because I actually read it. I actually read it. Yes, I came to talk about Proust. That Carolina.
We have a lot of people who can talk about Proust without reading. One of the things that I have really treasured. I'm coming up on a birthday, and downstairs we have scores of birthday cards that have been sent to me by the people who are in our. I think the term community is much overused, but people who call part of the open book community, and they've gotten to know each other on Periscope and Twitter and become friends. And one of the things I really like is the way our 17-year-old, who will be 18 in April, the people she talks about, the people who have been the important relationships to her through this nightly exercise, have less been the authors, except for you, Robert. But I mean, it hasn't been, Elizabeth Gilbert or Charlie Kaufman or James McBride or some very great authors that we've interviewed. It's been the people she's gotten to know who are listeners and viewers. That people who are in Pennsylvania, people who are in trailer parks, people who really made a connection through this. And I think it's been quite wonderful. The fat envelopes from colleges are arriving now, and she talked about what she learned doing open book in her college essay, which she has not let us read. Another one of the many things that I admire about her is that she wants to do it on her own. And but she did indicate that she wrote about that community of people that's come together. And this obviously we would not have been motivated to do it without the pandemic and the feeling that it was a time for people to reach out and also look, I'm not sure what you can see exactly in my nanogon here, but I mean we're surrounded by books, and so we've enjoyed taking books down to share parts of it and then to talk to authors about books they've loved and often a very wide-ranging conversation. One of the things, right, by the way, I think we're going to talk about tonight, Bobby Rivers, the critic, who I like a lot, movie and TV critic, is going to talk about the fact that because with this plethora, the surfeit of screening possibilities that we have these days, our points of common cultural reference are probably diminished. Now, Bobby says that he's an African American critic, and he says, of course, Gone with the Wind, absolutely repellent story. But he said, you don't see Gone with the Wind, you're not going to see Hattie McDaniel's Academy Award-winning performance. And he said, if you've never seen Gone with the Wind, or you're only going to see the most repellent clips, you will lose a common point of cultural reference, and people say, we don't want any more Gone with the Wind. And he said now with streaming, they're satisfied with much smaller numbers because audiences are essentially paying in advance. And he says we're losing our common points of cultural reference, and that'll drive us into more holes. And he doesn't think that's good. It'll reduce the number of things that we can talk about. So I love the opportunity to be able to do that, and it's been great. It's been wonderful.
I would just like to point out that when people receive the news that Broadway is closing, is shutting down, there is the human, what I'll call civilian reaction to that news, which is, oh my God, this is a blow to American entertainment and American culture. And then there is the broadcast reaction, which is that plus, holy cow, we have a 10-minute hole in the program now.
Yes, right, exactly.
That
yeah.
we're not expecting. What are we going to do to fill that hole? And we don't. It's not that journalists don't have the same feelings as other people, but in addition to those feelings are the anxieties of, hey, we got to make a program about something this week, and everything's shut down. So we'll do a program, I guess, about being shut down.
Yeah.
Scott, I'd like to ask the folks who've come here to hear you if they'd like to put questions to you, and I think if you'd like to ask Scott a question, or indeed if you must ask me a question, you can hit the space bar so that someone will recognize you. Or you can spin around like my daughter, who I think is in the front row. You're jumping. Yeah. Yeah. Leah Siegel. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Yes.
Robert, you go first.
I'll go first. I don't find a lot of advantages there, and there's an oddity, which is that people of my generation, and Scott's for that matter, although he could claim to be a little younger, I guess, we grew up expecting the video telephone to be developed any day. I mean, I think ever since television was invented, we post-war babies were somehow you were always expecting to see the visual telephone would be on the market any day now, and it of course took decades and decades for the idea of FaceTime to become something popular, and it took the internet to do that, and finally, we've reached a point at this stage where when I make an appointment with someone to talk about the panel we'll be doing next month. Sometimes talking on the phone no longer seems sufficient. It's should we FaceTime or Zoom this? And it's elevated the importance of seeing someone. I was one of those people doing interviews, and I was very proud of the company I shared because it included Terry Gross and Ted Koppel, who, like me, it turned out, all preferred to do an interview with somebody who was remote and away from us, and in Terry's case, whom we couldn't see. As Scott was saying, you don't want to have an interview on the radio in which the interviewee makes the point by giving a hand gesture. It means nothing. In an interview, when I'm alone in the studio, when I used to do that, I was hearing the very thing that you'll be hearing as a listener after we edit it and we put it on the air. I'm just hearing a voice. I'm not being distracted by what the person I'm interviewing is wearing or what he or she looks like. I'm not getting any benefit of facial expressions because they don't count in audio. And I'm in charge, so that if we're talking and the guest is somewhere else and can't see me, I can hit the cough button in the middle of some dreadful answer, and tell my editor, this isn't going anyplace. I'm just let me try again to go back to the first thing we tried, which you can't do when I can't do that when I'm talking to Scott right now. I can't just say. So I I always liked interviews in which I was the first radio ear to hear the interviewee, and now I'm kind of surprised that I find myself I have to, even if I'm at home, I have to, put on a shirt to get on to make a phone call because as likely as not, the person on the other end would really prefer for us to be able to see each other. So I don't know how you feel about that, Scott.
Yeah. No, I mean the advantages I think are all so-called advantages are I think all practical in the sense that um, I can interview a dissident in Myanmar at 6:30 in the morning Eastern time now,
Mm-hmm.
which would have been chancier before because, as you know, that wouldn't just be getting me in; it would be it'd be getting the whole crew in. Oh my God, is this really going to work out? Are we really going to play 4 hours of overtime to four people to, and then the WhatsApp connection may not work. Well, now 6:30 in the morning, I can't pretend I'm anywhere else. We would try it, and that's good.
Mm-hmm.
And introducing my daughters to Sam Smith and Justin Timberlake is good. And I'm able to do that because I'm home and they've often been home going to school remotely. But no, I don't think it's necessarily made for better interviews. There might be, exceptions. I also, and this is one thing, I'm going to become even more tiresome than usual when I sometimes talk to our producers about interviews. The important thing in an interview is to listen. It's less what you're going to, think you're going to ask in advance. And I have no
Mm-hmm.
problem with having, some of that pre-plotted, but it's to listen, not just to worry about going to the next question, getting the ground covered. And I think sometimes the Zoom calls are a little distracting on that basis. I believe there's some biometrical evidence to support that, as a matter of fact. So no, I wouldn't say it's necessarily been better, but look, we do the best we can. And I think there's an etiquette involved too. Sometimes people have asked to turn off their Zoom screens for reasons I understand, and we say, of course, and I turn off mine, or I'll volunteer to turn, whatever it is, I think.
There's a gentleman hopping up and down in the back.
Yeah, I'm about to say, he looks really excited.
Can whoever is controlling the questioning, can we hear from the gentleman, or maybe the?
Corey, can you hear me?
There's a big ball rolling in front of him to block him, I see.
Is it you? Corey, there you go.
Yeah, hear me okay?
Pretty low.
Yeah. He's looming over now.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, talking about advantages of the platform, this is an incredible bucket list item. The fact that I get to ask Robert Siegel and Scott Simon a question that never could have happened before. I'd like to ask you about the Communications Decency Act. It's something that's been weighing on my mind on the heels of the recent events. Now that we have this technology that allows us to communicate at the speed of thought, which is incredibly wonderful. We go back to, Arab Spring and Twitter and many other events that have shaped our new existence. Now you look at what just happened with January 6th and Parler, and the concept of these platforms being viewed as utilities, how to regulate, how to allow free speech. It's I think it's a pretty complex and very important topic, and I'm wondering what your positions are on that.
I think it's a complex and important topic. I can't do better than that. And I am, I'm very distressed that everybody is picking their platform at this particular point. I don't think that that's going to be healthy. I am, There's a part of me that's still very absolutist on the First Amendment. One of the first stories I covered for Robert was the march of Nazis through a predominantly Jewish suburb of Chicago called Skokie.
Yeah.
And I'm still in touch with a couple of the ACLU lawyers on that case who always used to conspicuously say, we are not defending Nazis, we are defending the First Amendment. And I absolutely believe in that. I am uncomfortable when people talk about regulation of speech. I understand the legal differences. Twitter, Facebook, they're publishers, they're platforms. They don't have to let everybody on, and I respect that too. And I think there should be an editorial process. But all of that being said, I get very uncomfortable when people begin to talk about the regulation of speech, because I think it's something that we wind up regretting when we're not the ones doing the regulation, or people who are not like-minded wind up doing the regulation. And these are going to be issues that we're going to continue to wrestle with. And
yeah.
So I get uncomfortable about all of it.
I would just like to pick up on the last thing that Scott said, which is that the one thing we can't afford to do is to imagine that somehow it'll go away, or somehow things will slow down again. You spoke of the speed of thought. I've had in several discussions like this, and on points similar to the one you've asked about. I like to remind people that when Louis Brandeis, as a lawyer in Boston, wrote an article or co-authored an article that really posited a right to privacy, which had not been asserted until that time. He was doing so in the face of a new technology that was intruding into people's lives, and that was limiting the degree to which people could control the way they chose to be seen, and the privacy that they hoped to enjoy. The technology was photography, and a set of photographs of a family who had not wished to be photographed had set off this brainstorm, happily, in the mind of a very wise lawyer, a campaigner for rights. And so we thought up the idea of privacy as a legal right in the U.S. We haven't stopped photography, and we're not going to ever live without the technologies that are now enabling some very wonderful things and some very ugly things. As for regulation, I would say, Scott, when you did your piece from Skokie, and I thought you were going to mention a piece which was germane to the movies this year. You did a piece on Fred Hampton and investigated the killing of Fred Hampton, and were on the hook there for a while, about to be subpoenaed for that piece, for your outtakes. Those were in days when the Federal Communications Commission still regulated radio and television stations, not networks, but our work appeared on stations. There were regulations. There was a fairness doctrine. For political candidates, there was an equal time provision. That was something different that's often misunderstood. But the fairness doctrine could set you up for losing a license if you didn't. The U.S. regulation was so weak that only 3 stations were ever denied license reapplication in the decades. But there was caution, and there was a belief in fairness as something that you had to place a value on. And it certainly didn't prevent Murrow. It didn't prevent Harvest of Shame from happening. It didn't prevent your reporting on the killing of Fred Hampton by Chicago police. And I don't think it would be I don't think it would be deadly to new media if they faced some form of regulation, if that were in some way feasible. I don't know.
I thought of the Fred Hampton and Mark Clark case today. This part of the interview was left out, but we interviewed a man, Dr. Ralph Daniel, I think is his name, psychologist in San Rafael, California, who has come forward to say that he was part of the group that 50 years ago burgled an FBI field office in Media, in fact, Pennsylvania, and uncovered documents that wound up being intrinsic in reporting the story of the FBI's COINTEL counterintelligence program, which of course included Mark Clark and Fred Hampton. And I said, "Oh boy, what I went through for that story, and I have you to thank." I liked him very much, and he had some trouble downloading the NPR recording app. And Peter Breslau, our producer, and I told him, "Well, we thought a hardened criminal like you would, really be much better at the technical side of things. How could you break into an FBI field office and don't know how to download an app?" He was very good natured.
I see. A generational thing. Do we have? I think we still have. Yes, we have time. Of course. Ask a question. Just jump up and down, and maybe Jess will recognize you. No, I think there's somebody. Well,
people are twisting around.
Well, I guess that. Well, if not, I'll ask Scott another question. What is that, Scott? Oh, no. You mentioned something about doing Zoom interviews. This is along the lines of what Leah was asking about before. But you mentioned earlier the informality, of the being inside the Hollywood movie star's home, and there is something. I heard this very recently at a religious service that which has been done by Zoom for the past year. That the informality that. In part because of our lack of familiarity with the technologies we're using, I think people are generally more forgiving of flubs, of things that go wrong, and it has, I think, yet again, because this has been going on for decades, I think rendered something which, when we were very young, was very highly stylized, the way that the news was delivered. And there are other fields of work that are very highly stylized. And I think this experience has made them more casual, more informal, more, referring to conversations that I've had with you when your children are doing the show, and or that is your own show. It's something that I think has taken a little bit of the pomposity out of a field of work that has an enormous capacity for being pompous and for self-regard.
Sorry, that's an old joke. Pompous, I think I think you're absolutely right, and I think and I think that part has been delightful, and people, not only do they understand our dog barking in the background, which I think can be funny, but we live along a river, and there are airplanes, frequently during the day, and I can remember when we used to stop interviews if we thought we heard a Piper Cub overhead. Because we thought people would find it distracting, and that we just, practically speaking, can't do that anymore with so many people working out of their homes. Overwhelming sound, but that's good. One thing I noticed, and it's obviously not in broadcasting, I participate in an occasional father's prayer group through our older daughter's high school. And we get together at, I think, at 7:30 in the morning. And in the old days when I would infrequently go, it was often after the school drop-off. And there was something nice about a group of fathers coming together, and most of it spent in silence. There's a scriptural reading, and then we all, had daughters of roughly the same age, and just wasn't a consciousness raising session, but I mean just talking about it, and the fact that we were physically there and came together said something and brought something to us. We've been doing it by Zoom now, and it's both good and it's bad. There's less of the sense of going out of your way to come together. When we have the moments of reflective silence, I occasionally sneak a peek, and people are taking sips of coffee, including me, to spell the reflective silence. But there's been a trade-off, but I think it's been better than not not doing it. And I don't know if this means if we return to in-person prayer groups, we're going to be slurping coffee throughout it. But I think that note of informality that you mentioned has entered the proceedings, and I think that's good, because I do think our relationship with our spiritual selves is important, but it works only if it is informal.
Yes, I think in fact the first thing you mentioned is a real measure of how far we've come. People have heard your dog barking during your broadcast. I remember, some people at NPR, I was one of them because I was a host of All Things Considered. I would finish work at about 6 p.m. or 6:15, go home, and then if we had to update the program for some reason, I or my co-host would have to do it. We rotated weeks. And I had a broadcast line to my house, and I would go upstairs and I would do an updated story with someone. And I think it was I think it was with our friend Neil Conan, actually. It was something about something bad. It was like an airplane crash or something. And my poodle decided at that moment to enter the room where I was, and there was a dog in the background. Louis, I just ignored it. And before that, famously, our friend, the late Cokie Roberts, was on Morning Edition when her basset hound, Abner, I think, began barking. Yeah. And these things were famous, or notorious moments when they happened. I got complaints from stations that a dog had been barking during this conversation about the plane crash, a 3-minute conversation, and the dog was probably at it for 1 minute, but it was a big deal. Nowadays, it's nothing. It happens. It happens all the time on cable television. At a Saturday morning service that I was at this morning by Zoom, which I attend, my cantor turned his camera on his basset hound so that his beagle. That was a beagle, and these things are now they're now much more accepted. There's been a loss of ceremony, and I think that I'm curious personally as to how much of that ceremony returns when the coast is clear, and how much of a new and slightly easier way of being stays with us. Says I with 2 vaccine shots already, so I can begin thinking this way.
I think people are going to demand I start bringing Daisy into the studio. She's become such a favorite, as a matter of fact. Yeah. I hope a lot of it does last, absolutely, and I don't want to be. I felt bad this week. We live in an apartment building, and the elevator door opens, which is, I don't know, maybe 30 feet from us, and Daisy immediately springs into defensive action. Right. She's a French poodle, so we call her the French Foreign Legion when that happens. And we were interviewing a doctor in Richmond, California, who was very moving, but talking about his, the hell of a year that he's had, and just a slight undertone. You could hear it, but I felt bad for him. And, I said, Doctor, what you said just then was so moving, but I could hear our dog. Would you like to take it again? And he said, no, I'm fine. I could hear it, but I get used to talking over things. It's not a problem. And you know, I think maybe our not just our ears, but our sense of concentration and focus is being set differently. And yeah, I think part of that too is you know going to be generational. The people who are growing up and experiencing it right now will have not known anything different. My wife and I, of course, were joking the other day. I forget what so-called sermon we were delivering at dinner to our daughters as to what was important in life. And my wife said something like, "I'm sorry if we sound like broken records," and we realized I have no idea what a broken record sounds.
Scott, thank you.
That
Thank
matter,
you.
I haven't heard one either in a while. Yeah.
John, thank you for nowhere.
Thank you.